Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's Will Wang from the Marketing from the Trenches podcast, and welcome back to another episode. So this one today is one or a topic that's kind of close to my heart because it was kind of what I built the business out of. One of the key skills we've got, one of the things that I think makes us world-class and sets us apart from the rest of the marketing world, and that is copywriting and emails, or emails specifically, I should say. So for my guest today, I've got on Adam Tuttle, who is the APAC or Asia Pacific Director for ActiveCampaign, which is the email service we use. This isn't sponsored by them. I've got no affiliation with them besides from using their software, but it's an amazing software piece. And I'm really happy to have Adam on today, sharing his ideas and insights, obviously across the ActiveCampaign platform, but also looking at emails in general. So I think you'll really enjoy this episode. In future, what I'm going to do is a copywriting series where I go and break down some of the best performing emails I've seen, some of the best performing emails I've written myself for clients and ourselves, and really go for the structure of what it takes and how you can put together a really high performing email. So for today though, I really wanted to get Adam on to speak about trends in emails, some of the technical things you should pay attention to, and how to get more of your emails open, read, and things happening from that, whether it's a sale or a lead coming through. So hope you enjoy this. And as always, head to growthlabs.com. That's growthlabz.com /resources for your free resource guides, which we're putting together and always updating. So that's growthlabs.com /resources. And let's get straight into it and jump into the episode. See you on the other side. So hey everybody, it's Will Wang back here with another episode of the Marketing from the Trenches podcast, and I've got my very special guest today. So I'm trying to work my way around the world. I've had a bunch of Aussies on the podcast, but today I've got my first American via Aussie. So I'm kind of working my way around there, but I've got Adam from ActiveCampaign, and for those of you who aren't aware, ActiveCampaign is an amazing email system, our email system of choice. So really glad that you're on here today, Adam. Mate, thanks so much for jumping on.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really exciting to do this.
Cool, awesome. So let's start with a bit of a story because you're an American living down here in Australia. Let's how did that happen?
Yeah, so I've been with ActiveCampaign for about 7 years. So I just hit 7 years a month ago, and was very early on in the company before we really started growing. When I started, I was one of two people that didn't write code. So really kind of early on in its days. And then in 2018, we opened our first international office, which was Sydney. And I think kind of just because of the path that I'd taken from a career standpoint and having the experiences that I've had through the growth, I was asked to consider moving to Australia with my family for a couple of years to kind of get the Sydney office here off the ground and running. And so it didn't take long to say yes to that amazing opportunity. And so a year ago, my wife and we moved our 4 boys over from the suburbs of Chicago to now Bondi Junction in Sydney. And we've just been living and loving life here in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, awesome, man. So it's obviously quite a bit of a journey, right? Halfway across the world.
Yeah, it's a hike.
And for me, I think I remember getting an email from ActiveCampaign saying, hey, we're actually starting a Sydney office, and kind of connecting with you shortly after that. And you guys have just been growing like crazy here. Like every time we talk, you're constantly adding new team members on board. So, I think, I know that you guys are pretty big in the US, but you must be doing something right in Australia as well.
Yeah, so we started last August 2018 with 8 team members, myself and one other American included in that picture. And we just surpassed 30 team members as of like the last couple weeks. And we're actually, so we've been in a co-working space here in Sydney with the Hub, it's called, but we're actually starting the process now of finding our own building that will allow us to grow up to about 75 to 100 people in the next couple of years. So we're really, really excited to just see that growth continue, not only here, but also in the APAC region. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to stem off of having a team here in Sydney. So we're really, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome, cool. So, hey, let's get into the good stuff because every time I talk to you, man, like you just blow my mind with all this kind of stuff that you guys are doing. So, why don't we do this? Why don't we start with some of the basics that Obviously, you're living and breathing emails every single day. The ActiveCampaign again is such a great system, so you've probably got a whole bunch of stats. Let's start off and look at in 2019, what are some of the trends or stats or insights that you can share of like how email's working?
I well, okay. I think that this is a trend. The first one I'm going to mention is something that has been only gaining momentum for the last few years, but I think in 2019 it is like number one on my list of what should be your priority, and that's personalization. When I started in email marketing back in 2012, there was still a lot of people kind of doing the blast emails and having that mindset. You don't hear that quite as much anymore. However, it's still really out there a lot, probably more than most people think. Because I think in marketing, we can kind of get in these little bubbles, right? Like you find people that are like-minded. So you find marketers that are doing it really well and they're personalizing everything and stuff like that. I think that that's important. And when I say personalization, I think it's really important to make clear that I'm not talking about putting someone's name in an email. That is a part of personalization, but that is by no means encapsulating of personalization with emails. And so when I'm talking about personalization, I'm referring to something that we call customer experience automation, which is a term ActiveCampaign has been kind of working with in the last 6 months and coining. But what we're talking about is like creating a journey that's personalized so that when you do send an email to somebody, rather than blasting out to a giant list, you're literally sending like the right message to the right person at the right time always. And so, finding what is the best time of day for somebody to open, taking data that you've been collecting and maybe taking them down different paths or journeys, and even things like getting rid of people off your list. Like that doesn't usually go into people's mindset with personalizing, but if you keep sending emails to somebody that's not opening, let's say you send 10 or 15 emails and they've not opened them, kick them off your list. Like you don't need to send them emails anymore because they're not engaging with you. Let them come back to you if they want. And I think things like that, again, is probably a bigger, we could spend hours just talking about ways to personalize, but I think that is only continuing to gain momentum at a very, very high pace. And so that's personalization is king in my book right now. I think the other aspect of that is trying to like go behind the scenes and actually see like what data you have available to you, and also using your marketing automation tools to collect data for you continuously so that you can better segment your audiences, better send, like it's enabling you to have actual personalization and real information on people that's probably viable. But you have to be really intentional to be collecting that data in the first place. And so that's probably step one of personalization is collect data. And then number two would be to actually personalize the journeys and stuff like that. But those two things to me right now, especially as we wrap up 2019, I think is, again, that's not old or like new information. These things have been around, but what I would say is that they're just gaining more and more momentum continuously. And that's, you have to pay attention to that stuff. If you're not, like, reevaluate your whole process because you're missing out on something.
Yeah, man, that is so huge, and we're definitely going to dive deep into that because I know that you guys are doing some really cool things in terms of how to collect data, how to use it, how to personalize it. So I really want to dive in deep with this in just a bit. But it's such a good point as well. I was literally just before this call, I was reviewing a campaign that we're doing for a client, and this isn't even like a warm because typically with ActiveCampaign, it's all warm leads that have opted into a list. This was a cold email campaign using different technology, and on a campaign we did personalization on, we got like a 27% reply rate on a cold email, and the stuff that we weren't doing, it was way lower than that. It was like 6 or 7%. So personalization is everything at the moment, especially with cold emails, and I'm sure with warm emails too.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're seeing the same thing on our outbound teams. So rather than just trying to, make 100 dials a day or send 200 emails or whatever it is, we're actually trying to like take way more time, send really personalized, hyper focused, and that's how we're seeing results. The kind of generic, just like, again, power through this, quantity it's not working as well as it used to. We've been seeing that in America for a long time. I think we're seeing it more and more in Australia as well. And so we're focusing more on how do we personalize every touch, whether it be outbound, inbound, or whatever, as opposed to just like having these kind of boiler templates that just do, kind of accomplish nothing at the end of the day.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. Let's kind of get into it, right? Because typically, like when someone joins our email list, for example, typically the only thing we get from them is their name and their email. So, in that kind of situation, like what extra data is ActiveCampaign getting, and how are you guys using that to personalize? Like, what flows have you seen work really well?
Yep. So, well, I think there's a couple of things that I would always suggest. One is if you have like somebody that just signs up for your list and all they give you is name and email, to me, that's a really great opportunity to ask for more information. So what you can do is in your first or second follow-up email, depending on how many you have for your sequences, I would actually say, hey, like, let's just say it's the first one. Hey, thank you for signing up. Really appreciate it. Here's the frequency you can expect to get emails from us. Here's the content, the value that we're trying to add, et cetera, right? So you're kind of setting the picture of what they're going to be getting from you. And then I would say, in order to help us make your life better and not fill your inbox with things that you don't care about, we would invite you to take 30 seconds to fill out a quick survey, give us some information, and then we'll try to only send you content related to those things. If you're not interested, we're going to put you on our generic stuff, and you can always update your preferences later, right? I think people would be really surprised at how many people actually take the time to click on that and give information back. There's a huge opportunity. Now, obviously, certain businesses are a little different. I've seen this work really well in e-commerce. We had a customer, this was years ago, but like I think it's still relevant today. What they did is they ran a 10% off coupon on their website. So that was their kind of like catch, right? Their tripwire or whatever is like, get the 10% off and here you go, give us your email address. A lot of the people that were filling that out, they weren't putting any stipulations on it that it could be like had to be a new customer. So they were even giving it to existing customers to like draw them back in, get repeat business. And in that first email, they say, here's your coupon code, insert that as a personalization tag. Then the second piece was, hey, like fill this out. We want to make sure you're only getting clothing options that you're relevant to. And they had like 30% click rates, which is insanely high. Now that was out of all the people that opened it, right? So it's not like you're not going to get 100%, but if you can even increase by like 5 or 10%, like that's data that's valuable to you. So like I think that's really important. The second piece of this is look at ways that automation tools can help you behind the scenes. One example of this that I give, I actually was at an expo in the Gold Coast this weekend, and I set this up for 2 different clients while we were there. And I have it on my personal accounts as well, so I believe in it enough to do it myself, is I go in and I create a custom field in my contact or my list database, whatever it is, in ActiveCampaign, and I say this field is a date-based field, and it's called last open date. So pretty simple. And then I build an automation that anytime somebody opens any email, doesn't matter what it is, etc., it actually takes them and it updates that field to today's date. So if I open an email from you today, my last open date is today. Why that isn't valuable is now I can start building off other sequences and other automations for engagement sequences. Hey, it's been 90 days, you haven't opened any emails. Appears that you're not interested anymore. We're going to take you off our list if you don't sign back up, right? It's allowing you to help do like list cleaning and hygiene, which is super important. At the same time, you can be measuring engagement with people, and for your business, then you can make educated decisions on how you want to treat those people rather than say, well, they're on my email list and I'm going to send them all this information continuously no matter what. Now you can start saying, oh, hey, like if someone hasn't opened an email in 30 days and we've sent them 4 emails, let's try to entice them back into like engagement, because open rates affect deliverability in a colossal way. So it's really important to have this stuff. And a lack of open rates, like people don't often realize that actually hurts you. So it's one of those things that if somebody's not opening emails over and over and over again, most likely Gmail is not even delivering the emails at some point, or they're just putting them into spam. So it's really important to take out those emails and stop sending to them because they're disengaged with you.
Yeah, that's amazing. And look, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because a lot of the time when we talk to clients, especially about the emails and stuff, all they think about is what do we write. But if the emails aren't even getting into inboxes, you can have the best copyright in the world writing the emails, but the emails aren't getting seen. So that's super important. So so I've kind of got a question stemming off that, and I don't know if, stop me if it gets too technical, right? But let's just say someone's got a list out there. There's, say, 10,000 people on the list, a very low engagement on the list. They're not even sure people have been opening the emails for a while. Open rates are pretty low. What would you recommend they do? Obviously, the first step is to cull the list. Would you recommend them starting a new list, or would it be more of a case of let's just try and revive, resuscitate, do all that kind of stuff?
Sure. So I think first you have to ask yourself, like, what are you trying to get out of that list, right? Like that needs to be a really important question, because a lot of times people are sending emails, they're sending, newsletters, whatever it might be, but they don't actually know why they're doing it, right? They do it because the marketing blogs tell them they need to, or an agency is like, hey, we need to send your newsletter, right? But they don't actually have that why defined. And I think that if you're seeing really bad open rates, things, before you start even getting to the point of okay, we're going to clean the list, you have to know your why, right? You have to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, because then that will help you take educated steps as to what the results should be. So if you say, well, we want to send these emails, but we really want to get more people back to our website to start downloading our ebooks, because that tells our sales team it's time to engage with people. What I'd say is okay, well, is your content that you're sending actually updated frequently enough to have the drivers back to your ebooks? Well, no, we don't actually mention our ebooks except for a little blurb at the bottom of all of our newsletters. Okay, so if you're going to have a call to action, it needs to be your call to action, not like an afterthought, right? And so I think that those types of things are really important to look at. I definitely, though, to follow that up with, believe in list hygiene. We actually put automations in the accounts for our customers automatically. They're not turned on, but they're available to them to basically click a button and they're ready to go. That will help clean out lists. And so from a company that makes money off of the size of a contact list, for us to tell people to remove contacts from that list seems counterintuitive, except we understand the power of good open rates. Good open rates for us create loyal customers. They also help maintain our servers. We have hundreds and hundreds of mail servers that we're managing and maintaining. If everybody's just sending spammy, emails 10 times a week, that doesn't help us. And so by creating these types of things where people are trying to create actual processes around how to treat somebody through their journey with them, it helps us have better deliverability as a whole. So, I mean, you got to think about it from a strategic standpoint on our end. By empowering people to do this, it's actually a win-win. It's helping the customers have a better experience, but it's also helping us as a business be able to continue to offer a high level of service. So I do believe in list hygiene, and it's something that we preach very heavily. But I think that before you get into that, you have to, I would always encourage people to evaluate why they've been doing what they're doing. Is it working? Do they need to just take a new approach and see if that new approach works, right? Maybe we say that we have a great list of 10,000 contacts, but we actually have been sending really crap content for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. So yes, we probably do need to implement some tools that will help us, get rid of people that aren't engaging and stuff like that. And we can do that moving forward. However, we're going to also take the time to maybe have better call to actions that are right at the top of the email so people can see it on their mobile devices and, things like that. So kind of a long answer to a question, but I hope that helps.
No, it's awesome. Look, I think the more detailed the answers, I think it's better as well, because lots of the people listening to this or watching this, they're in the process of implementing or trying to fix the email list. So it's the details are awesome, man. Thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, no, it's cool. So one thing that you said just then was actually really interesting to me, and probably one of the reasons that I've picked ActiveCampaign to be our software of choice is because of the fact that, you come through and the company does things that may not be good for them short term, but long term it's kind of that win-win. So that sequence you're talking about, super interesting to me. And I actually, I played around with it a fair bit, but I haven't seen the sequence in there. So I might be missing, or, my account's a fairly old account now. Might be a little bit wild. Might not have it in there for me.
Yeah, no, I think that it is important. And like, what I always like to tell people is like, listen, there's no one size fits all. I mean, like ActiveCampaign has over 80,000 active accounts under our belt right now, which is an amazing feat. But like the thing that I continue to see with that is there's diversity on every level that you can imagine, from, bloggers that are like literally starting their business today to companies that have been around for 30 years that are finally implementing digital marketing, to businesses that are, e-com businesses that are absolutely smashing it with their stuff, and they have massive lists that are generating them millions of dollars a year in revenue, right? So there's kind of all things in between. And I think that it's really important, again, as we talk about how to build quality emails, is that you find, get inspired by others, watch take the classes, read podcasts, listen to that kind of stuff. But like, there's not a one size fits all. There's not a silver bullet to your vampire. There's like, you have to be willing to like actually put effort into it on your own and find what works for your business and your audience. And that's how you personalize above all else, is you take, the emails and you say, who's reading this? Is it someone, is it is it a CEO? Is it a stay-at-home mom? Is it a fireman? Like, who's reading my newsletters? And then once or emails, and then like, what's the point of my emails, right? Like, how can I better curate the content for these people? And like, you have to know your audience. So, and that's what goes back to the whole thing of like being willing to ask questions for more information. If you can like continually just keep asking for that information and building it out, you open the doors for like unreal possibility for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So going further into that a little bit then, I guess it's almost an invalid question, right? It's a question I had written down that I think it's a question I don't like getting asked because I think it's not the right question, but I'm just going to annoy you a little bit and ask you the same question. But what benchmarks do you set, depending on industry or things like that, for open rates, click rates? Because I know for me, it's like, how long's a piece of string? But how do you normally answer that question?
Well, I think that that's your response is probably close to my response. But what I would say is like, okay, like let's just set some very high level benchmarks. I would say that as a general rule of thumb, okay, again, so this is being like broad, if you're experiencing continuously rates below 10%, that's not good. That's not good. Like, you should really evaluate things. If you're between 10 and 15%, that's okay, but you're probably on your way to not good, right? Like you're going to start noticing like a dip probably more aggressively than you have in the past. Above 15% to like say 20, I would say like you're doing well, but there's room for improvement. And then anything 20% or higher is good. If you're hitting like 30% plus, like you're a rock star at that point. 30% open rates consistently it's tough, depending on how you're sending. But again, these are just kind of generalizations as a whole. But I think that, what I would say is probably like, it's like, you got to think about it not so much like what's good, but you have to think about like what's bad, because the bad will impact you a lot better or like a lot worse than, having like just great open rates all the time will be positive for you. And here's a good example. I had a customer a few years back. They had a contact list of 200,000 people, and they were averaging 1.5% to 2% open rates on their emails. Wow. Because they sent garbage. They sent like literal garbage every single day. They just smashed people's inboxes. And I've seen people with a contact list of 10,000, right? So much smaller. They're averaging 30 and 40% open rates. So they're actually outperforming, even from a just pure number standpoint of contacts engaging with them, the person with 200,000 contacts with a 2% open rate, is like 4,000 people interacting.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like if you can have a 50% open rate on a 10,000 contacts, you're doing better than that. And so I think that what I would say is like, you have to be able to, like, obviously benchmarks can change. You can figure it out for your industry, but typically speaking, if you're below at 10%, you really should be looking at some things. And make sure that your like domain's authenticated with your email provider. That's really a good one to start with. Make sure that you're putting like, proper links back to your website and stuff like that. People can click on it, but open rates affect deliverability and link clicks don't. So, you can have like low open rate and really high link clicks within those opens, but that doesn't really impact your overall deliverability, at least from like Gmail standpoint. However, opens, bar none, are like very important to them, like maybe the most important. And so making sure, again, having those higher open rates are really good. And it's not going to just change overnight, but I think doing things like automating the initial steps, like you'd be surprised at how many, well, maybe you wouldn't be, you've probably seen it, how many people have like someone signs up for their newsletter and they don't even send anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like the faster that you can interact with somebody right away, like your open rates on automations typically are much, much higher. Why? Because they're targeted. And when you have targeted automations, then they tend to have better results. And so you can kind of start drawing the lines between, what yields good results for you and doesn't. But again, I would say it's a rule of thumb. If you're below 10%, like you really need to start evaluating things. And if you're in that 10 to 15% range, I would like make sure absolutely that you're not going back down. If you start seeing trends down, then you really, really need to start evaluating what's going on and why that's happening. Because again, thinking long term, it's going to start having some pretty negative impacts on you at some point.
Yeah, dude, so much got in that again. There's so many different points to uncover. Like just the fact that, sometimes like a lot of people, especially in the marketing space, they compare the size of the list. But, as the old saying goes, it's not the size, it's how you use it, right? So I've seen people with like, fairly small lists of several thousand, and they just write really good emails. They engage properly. They send good content. People are waiting to hear from them every single week, and they just crush it. Like in terms of revenue generated or, value per subscriber on the email, it's like so much higher than someone with a list of, 500,000, but it's just crap. So
Yep. Well, I think too, it's like look for the opportunities, right? Like, so we have a function in ActiveCampaign, and a lot of other tools have something similar, but we call it conditional content. Conditional content allows you to take a block of content, whether it be a text or picture, video, whatever, it doesn't matter, and hide it if somebody doesn't meet specific conditions. So for example, let's say that I'm an e-commerce store and I sell both men's and women's clothing, and I would want to know the gender because I would want to put a picture specifically for men, for men's clothing. I would want to put a picture specifically for women. And if I don't have that information, I want to have something that's pretty neutral. And people don't take the time to do that. They don't think about it that way. But to me, that's like, there was a newsletter that I was on here for a clothing line in Australia. And I actually really like their clothes for like gym gear, t-shirts, shorts, pants, all that kind of stuff. But every time I got emails from them, it was always for women's clothing. And it was like, well, that's fine. But at some point, like that has absolutely zero value for me. And now you're just filling up my inbox with stuff that's like garbage to me. And so I unsubscribed purely because of the fact that the email wasn't personalized to my gender. And they never asked. And I would have given them that information. And so like I was getting just, again, advertisements for like the sale on like chicks yoga pants, and like that has really no appeal to me, for what I'm purchasing. So I think that we have to, as marketers, we have to be like looking for opportunities of ways to literally, from pictures to text to everything, be tailoring content to the audience. And, the thing that I've said to a lot of people, and I kind of, you get these like big eyeballs when you say it from people, but it's like, if you don't think that your competitors are doing this, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. And in the next 5 years, the businesses that learn how to personalize like above and beyond into every single interaction and learn how to collect data so that they can actually do that effectively will be the businesses that win. And if you don't like get that sorted for yourself, like you'll lose at some point, or you'll be missing out on massive revenue opportunities. And I like really like believe that, like 100% believe it.
Yeah, yeah, dude, I'm so with you on that. I'm so with you on that path. And like, just going back to the example of you in the gym store, like, just imagine, you obviously really like the clothes enough to sign up to the email list, and could have been a lifetime buyer of every single site that they put out. Imagine the amount of revenue they've lost, doing this across several thousand people just because they haven't personalized enough.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and like I was like I was on the I'm probably like the annoying guy that clicks on their Instagram ads like all the time, and they're probably losing so much revenue on me. But like I think even to like here's another way, like let's talk about, like, as we're talking about the journey, right? Like they collected my email. They could have then, if they're using a tool like ActiveCampaign effectively, they could have automatically placed me into a Facebook custom audience, and they could have me in there for like 30 days, and they could say, listen, he's clicked on our ads like 5 times, but he hasn't actually ever purchased. Let's remove him because he's just like a guy that kicks the tires. And like maybe we'll get a sale, but it's literally not worth the ad spend on him. Whereas somebody else you could put into a custom audience, and they might like be like, oh yeah, and they're like engaging with you, and you can see what they're doing on your website, and like it's giving you all this data back, right? But like why it's just so important to like know who the person is that you're trying to talk to, and to make the message personalized to them. We live in a world that every single day is becoming more and more personalized in everything that's around us, right? Like we have Netflix, right? They personalize, like my feed versus my kids feed versus my wife feed is completely different from each other. And even my boys, I have twin 9-year-olds, and their two Netflix like profiles have different shows. Even though they typically watch generally the same thing, there are certain ones that shows that one likes to watch over the other, and his content now is tailored to him as opposed to his brother. Right? Like there's a lot to be said for that personalization of just like the bigger world that we live in. And why should marketing be an exception to that? In anything, it should be like the standard, the gold standard of what personalization looks like.
Yeah, absolutely right. Dude, that's so good. So just to kind of start wrapping things up, what is there a question that I should have asked you that I haven't?
That's a good one. I think that like one thing that I would say is maybe like a pointer is like, let's say that you have maybe a marketing manager or that's been doing this for a while, but they're hearing this right now and they're like, oh man, it's kind of gotten a little bit vanilla, right? Like it's just, we've kind of just said this works. And maybe you're even having really good results. Maybe you're averaging like 25% open rates, really high click rates, like you feel good, but you've been doing the same thing for a couple of years. I would argue that you're probably still losing out because you're not trying to make yourself better, right? So there's something to be said for that. On the flip side, you have like a marketer who maybe is brand new, right? So they're listening to this and they're like, oh my God, I haven't done any of this. And it all of a sudden, like, it's like they feel the walls closing in. It's very overwhelming. I think that like what I would say is when you're approaching this and how do you do it, start with defining what your objections are, your goals are for yourself. That will always give you a good foundation of like to help point yourself in the right direction. So like, when people say, how do I get started with this? Or how do I reevaluate what we've been doing? I would say, sit down, write down, and figure out what your actual goals and objectives would be. And I would make that for like semi-annual and annual objectives. So you can say, here's our 6-month goal, here's our 12-month goal. And then I would start working backwards from, okay, if we want to increase our open rate by X amount, we could either remove our non-active contacts, right? So we now have fewer contacts in our database, but we have more engagements. So we're seeing higher open rates and things like that. Culling naturally will give you more open rates, right? The other thing that they can look at is, what tools in the platform that I'm using, whether it's ActiveCampaign or not, are actually giving me that I'm not utilizing, right? Like we have a lot of people that I see all the time, even with training and stuff like this, that they're like, I didn't know you could do that. And I think that taking time to invest in the tools that you're paying money for will honestly help you be a lot more successful with them. So I think when you're getting started, kind of know where you want to go, and then look at the tool set that you have in your deck, and then see like, what can I build that gets me to that goal, and kind of reverse engineer it. And that typically to me is like a, if like I said, if where does somebody start, that would be like where I would tell them to get going.
Yeah, awesome. So this, just to summarize that, look at what the ultimate goal for not just the emails, but for the business is, and then kind of work backwards step by step, to figure out how email fits into that. And then obviously the email systems. Interesting point you brought up as well about continual improvement. I'm going to brag a little bit here and, throw out some numbers, but our email sequences are typically around 30% every single week that we send emails out. And making one small change based on one of the blogs and one of the information pieces I saw from ActiveCampaign, we've actually taken that up to 5%, like, to 35%. So an increase of, 5% just across the board. But that 5% is going to have such a big impact because it's 5% more people opening it, which means 5% more chance to impact them. And it's not a 5% increase in revenue. It's going to be huge. So it's that whole piece about incremental improvement and always looking to improve. I think that's amazing as well. So Adam, thanks so much for sharing, man. Like, you absolutely dropped some gold nuggets here, and I think everyone listening or watching again is going to get so much value from this. I kind of already alluded to how to get started with this email stuff, but someone who's looking at ActiveCampaign or wants to learn more, where would they go?
Yeah, so I would say just go to activecampaign.com/free, and you can get signed up for a trial there, which is great. And then we do have, like I said, our team here is here in Sydney. So if you're an Australian or in the Southern Hemisphere with APAC, in that greater surrounded region, I'd say the trial, we should have someone from our team reaching out to us, to you, or you can shoot us an email at sales@activecampaign.com, and we'll make sure that we can get you on a demo and answer any questions that you have. So, start the trial, and that usually gets the ball rolling, but then you can certainly go from there.
Cool. Awesome. Hey, again, thanks so much, mate. Really appreciate talking to you. Every time I talk to you, I learn something more about emails, which is such an important part. So, mate, we'd love to have you back on in future as well. But again, thanks so much for today.
Yep, absolutely. And thanks again, man.